Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 349. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Sunday, February the 11th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Topic of today's essay, China's continued slide. There's a ton of things going on in China, none of which are good for their economy, for the people of China, or for the world in general. And for whatever reason, President Xi, in his unrelenting quest to hang on to power, just continues to let the country, the economy, the people, China's perception throughout the world, with the exception of Russia or Iran or North Korea, slide. We're going to talk about a bit of that, what they're doing, and because this stuff isn't being reported in the traditional media sources. Again, I don't think it's a big conspiracy that they're not doing it. I've said this before, but there's just only so much time, and people have only so much of an attention span to listen to this kind of stuff. So, in fact, that's kind of been the topic of my podcast for quite some time now, kind of the news of the day, but not the main news of the day. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think that the media is hiding this from you because they're part of the conspiracy. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that this is such I don't want to say a non-issue. It's not the Super Bowl. It's not Taylor Swift. It's not the economy in your city, county, state, or even country. So indirectly, it really doesn't affect you. Indirectly. Directly, it means a ton. So anyway, we're going to talk about China's continued slide, what they're doing to just hamstring themselves, because China, in theory, probably should have eclipsed the U.S. economy by now. And in just about every single statistic, they're getting the gap between the U.S. and China is getting further and further and further away. They're a country of 1.2 billion. We're a country of 140 million or 340 million. So they have four times as many people as we have. And we keep growing and they keep shrinking. Anyway, we'll talk about that, but there's other stuff going on as well. Number one, I wanted to get an update on the restoration project for the 1951 Jaguar Mark 7. One of the three things that I undertook that actually the two big things that I have to undertake, I guess it's three that I've never done before. Probably the hardest is the one I'm doing now. And, the one that I finally hit a milestone. I'm rewiring the whole car. Okay. That car was, 73 years old now. And what wiring was left was eaten by the rodents while it sat in my father's garage. So I ripped out all the wiring, bought a new harness, bought a wiring diagram, and I'm in the process of wiring this thing. Now, I've never done any wiring at all in my life. So this is a skill that I'm trying to learn. And I guess I would say I'm successful because I'm making slow but sure progress. But Saturday, Dad and I were working on the car. I did the wiring diagram, or I was working on the wiring using the diagram for the dashboard, which there are so many wires, and they're all different colors, and they all go here, and sometimes they're hard to get to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I finished it. So the dashboard is wired. The dashboard is like the brain, so everything goes from the dashboard. So now the dashboard is wired, and all these outlets go to the lights, the starter, the fuse box, the wiper motor, the starter, all the other stuff, okay? So a big deal for me anyway. I mean, I did the wiring. Dad is working on the box that the dashboard bolts onto. It was all rusty and nasty, and he took everything apart and sanded all the old paint and rust off of it, and he rechased the threads and tapped the holes and put everything back together, and that's in pretty good shape. As soon as the weather breaks, we'll paint it. And so slow but sure progress being made on the 1951 Jaguar Mark VII. There's a guy who died this week in other news. His name was Ron Rivet. Nobody ever heard of him. I never heard of him. But he was an interesting guy. He founded the Super 8 motel chain. Now, you think to yourself, well, Super 8 it's not a big deal. Well, it was and it wasn't. I mean, back in 1974, when it was founded, it was a big deal. Back in the 1950s, when he was a boy, Ron had gone on vacation with his family. And really the only place to stay in at that time were Holiday Inns and the mom and pop local places. Well, Holiday Inns were expensive, especially for most families. And the mom and pop places were sketchy at best. You had no idea what you were getting into. I mean, you could go in, it could be a homesy, folksy place that was comfortable and clean and reasonably priced, or it could be a rat hole. You never knew, okay? So he thought to himself, yeah, there's Motel 6. Sure, I understand there's a Motel 6, but there's got to be something between Motel 6 and Holiday Inn. So he founded Super 8. It was $8.88 a room. That's why he called it Super 8. That's what a room cost in 1974 at a Super 8, okay? It was like an upgrade from Motel 6, because remember, Motel 6 got its name because it was $6 a room. Now, Motel 6 was super no frills, no carpet, no telephone. They had a television, but you had to put money in the slot to turn it on. I mean, it was a totally no frills. Super 8, yeah, you got a TV. Yeah, you got a phone. We put some shag carpeting in the room to make it halfway comfortable. But the big thing that Motel 6 did that Holiday Inn did not, they didn't do restaurants, because doing food for a hotel is expensive. They don't make money off of the food normally, okay? Occasionally they do, but normally they don't. It's kind of something, okay, it's an also ran thing, so as long as you're here, you can eat as well. He also didn't have money to market. Hey, where do I put hotel rooms? So I thought to himself, okay, look, if I'm going to be competing with Holiday Inn has done the research. Holiday Inn knows where to put hotels. They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I'll just put my hotels next to Holiday Inn. Well, the next question is, okay, what do I do? Because the people are going to need something to eat. Well, they could walk across the street to the Holiday Inn and get something to eat. So he solved all those problems. Holiday Inn restaurants are not cheap. Later on, he partnered with McDonald's, and he actually had a conversation with Ray Kroc. He said, look, people stop at your place to get something to eat. Maybe they want to sleep someplace. I could partner with you. And that way they can come by your McDonald's and get something to eat in the morning or in the evening, and both. Ray Kroc liked that idea. So he started, if a McDonald's restaurant had a plot of land that was big enough for a restaurant and then some, the then some included the Super 8. So you still to this day see a lot of Super 8s next to Holiday Inns and next to McDonald's, okay? And he also did interesting ways. How do you build a hotel? Okay. If you notice, they all have his term, puke yellow sign and stucco outside. Okay. Why did he do stucco outside? Because he had a buddy that did stucco and got a deal from him. So his buddy did all the stucco on all the Super 8 hotels. He couldn't get a bank loan for his first hotel in 1974. Went to all kinds of banks. Nobody would give him a loan. Finally, he found a banker that said, I got this kid who's not the sharpest knife in the drawer and he needs a job. I'll give you the loan if you hire my kid to manage your first hotel. So he did. So he got the loan and the kid got a job. Everybody was fine. Ron Rivet owned the hotel chain until 1993, where he sold it for $125 million to Wyndham Hotels. So he did quite well over the years. He was 83 years old, died last week, and actually was still active in hotel management. And so while he had already sold the Super 8 chain, he would buy other hotels, some of them Super 8s, and just manage them. He even started a hotel chain called My Place, which was kind of like a 21st century Super 8 chain. Anyway, Ron Rivett, rest in peace. He was 83 years old. Before we get into China, there's a bit more ugliness going on just south of here with the despot of the Western, I guess the Americas, I'll just say, Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. The neighboring country, Guyana, all of a sudden has a big oil reserve. So Maduro says, yeah, well, 2/3 of your country is really mine. He wants to annex a part of Guyana that's the size of Florida. And he's even deployed troops and fired weapons as part of war games within 150 yards of Guyana's border. Now, Guyana, for obvious reasons, I mean, they don't want to go to war with Venezuela. Venezuela has a 150,000 man army. Guyana has 3,000. Venezuela has a population of 28.2 million, even though they've lost 25% of their population since Chavez took over. They've just left because it's horrible in that country. Guyana has 800,000 people in the whole country, okay? So if they went to war, it would be a matter of days before Guyana was taken over, okay? They don't have a true army. They have a police force, all right? So if they attack and the United States doesn't intervene, it's over in a couple of days. Brazil is involved too. UK is involved too because Guyana is, I'm not sure if they're part of the Commonwealth, but they're a former British colony. In fact, Guyana is the only South American country where English is the official language. Okay, it used to be called British Guyana years ago during colonial times. So I don't know what's going on. Nobody in South America thinks this is a good idea. Even Cuba has told Maduro, hey, why don't you cool it? Why don't you not do this? All right. So Cuba is not even on his side. Guyana and Venezuela have sat down at the table. What they've done is they've agreed to talk this out. As soon as the meetings were done, they put a bunch of troops right on the border. So you can't trust Maduro. You can't trust Venezuela's dictator. I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully cooler heads will prevail. A worst case scenario is Maduro just goes in there and takes over the country. If that happens, guess who gets involved? Yeah, it's going to happen. If Maduro invades, we're going to get involved, and it's going to be a big time mess. Okay, on to today's essay. China's continued slide. All kinds of stuff going on in China. And I've said before, I mean, I've been to China many times, but I've been to Hong Kong many, many more times. And when I first started going to Hong Kong, it was after the annexation. What was the annexation? 1997, I want to say, where Britain's lease ran out and they gave it back to China because that was the terms of the agreement. We'll give it back in 1997. They did. And China annexed Hong Kong with the understanding of one country, two sets of laws. Okay. We're going to let Hong Kong do their own thing, have their own governor, run their own country, have their own currency, have their own stock market, but they're really part of China, but we're going to let them do their own thing. And when I went there, they did. I mean, they had free protests. They had a free economy. They had newspapers who were free speech newspapers. When I spent time in Hong Kong, if you went to lunch, you would see a lot of Western businessmen. And these were Western businessmen that just weren't there for the week doing business like I was. They lived there. Okay. They were part of the business. They had offices in Hong Kong because Hong Kong was kind of the gateway to China. It was a whole lot easier to work with China through Hong Kong than it was to work directly in China. They had the infrastructure. They had people spoke English. It was easy to get in and out of. A lot of Western people there. It was kind of the hub of industry in Asia. Okay. Things have changed, and I will not go back to China. China was wonderful. I enjoyed it. The size and scope of the whole country is just daunting. It's huge. It was dirty, but it was big. I enjoyed it there. Okay. Hong Kong, I really liked Hong Kong. Hong Kong, to me, was the most exciting place in the world when I first started going there. And it may still be now. I don't know. But it's changed. It's changed a lot. And the reason I will not go back there is because if they don't like you over there, they just arrest you and throw you in prison. Case in point, there's a guy named Tian He-yu. He was the president of the China Merchants Bank, okay? And he was convicted of bribery. Now, these were not trumped up charges. By all indications, this guy really did steal from the people. And it was really a case where he was a bad guy. He did bribe, he did steal, he broke the law. And he was sentenced to death. Yeah. I mean, not prison, they sentenced him to death for bribery. Okay. Well, he apologized. He returned all the money and they said, okay, we're going to go ahead and suspend your sentence. Well, a suspended sentence in China is not the same as a suspended sentence here in the U.S. In the U.S., a suspended sentence means, okay, we're going to give you 12 years in jail, but we're suspending the sentence. You're released on time served, if any. Okay. A suspended sentence in China means we're going to delay it. In other words, we're not going to execute you now. Because you gave all the money back and you admitted to doing the wrong thing, we're not going to kill you for 2 years. There is no appeals court in China. So it's not like in this country where the appeals goes on for 20 years anyway. There is no appeals court. Okay. So this guy apologized and for doing that, they said, well, good for you. We won't hang you or shoot you or give you the gas chamber or however they do it over there for another 2 years. So we'll let you live and think about it. But in 2 years, it's curtains for you. And he's not the only one. There was an Australian citizen who was sentenced to death for espionage. Now, when they sentence you to death for espionage, that's just a blanket statement because you've done something they don't like. Okay. His name is Hang Zhenjian, and he's a novelist and a blogger. And actually he was born in China, but he's a Australian citizen. And he wrote spy novels, but he was a blogger too. And on his blogs, he said bad things about Xi and the government. He was very critical of them. His mistake, he went back there to visit. Friends, they threw him in jail. Okay. And he's been sentenced to death for espionage. And there is no suspension of this. They're talking about maybe suspending a sentence if between now and the day he gets executed, he's good behavior, and they may even suspend his sentence and just give him 25 years in prison. But this guy he said things they don't like, so they threw him in prison. Okay. And he's not even a Chinese citizen. He's an Australian citizen. Australian government has protested. And they said, sorry, he's in our country. This is our country, our rules. We're not doing anything about it. There's yet another unnamed foreign national. I don't know why they haven't named him because I assume it's even a him. I think there's negotiations going on to release him, but he too has been just detained and accused of being a British spy. There's a British businessman. I talked about this a few weeks ago in my podcast. Ian Stone was sentenced to 5 years, again, for espionage, that blanket term. The guy was a businessman and lived in China for 20 years. He's been detained, not charged, for 5 years. They don't know where he is. And they ask him, hey, this guy's a British citizen. The British consulate says, where is this guy? They said, don't worry about it. He's being detained. For what? Espionage. Well, can we see the charges? No. Can we visit with him? No. That's just it. Now, they just released a guy named Cheng Li. He was an Australian journalist who was detained for 3 years, never charged, never tried. They just detained him for questioning. 3 years. That's what's going on in China nowadays. So you wonder why I won't go there? As much hate as I spew toward Xi and the communist dictatorship that he runs, they could very easily detain me and never let me go, sentence me to death, hold me forever. Who knows? That's just the world that we live in today. And dear listeners, you really need to be careful. You really need to take heed before you go to some place like China or Iran or Iraq or anywhere in the Middle East, even Israel nowadays. It's not safe. It's just not safe. There's parts of Mexico that I go to on business that are not safe. But you know what? That's my job. All right. Maybe it's a foolish thing that I do it, but I do it. But for the most part, if the United States government says, yeah, you need to be thinking twice before you go to this place. At the very least, folks, dear listeners, think twice. And it's just not Xi and his totalitarianism that's bringing the country down. Their economy continues to shrink. Years ago when China was growing at 16, 17, 18%, the best economists in the world say, look, there's no doubt that China's growing, but they're not growing by 16, 17, 18%. They're just not. And what's the figure I want to put? Not a barometer, but kind of like the multiplier they put into the Chinese numbers. Because everyone even said, look, they just lie and they make stuff up. They don't make everything up, but they pad their figures. They have their thumb on the scale, use whatever term you want. But basically they say anything that comes out of China, subtract 8% from it, it's probably going to be closer to true. Well, folks, when they had 16% growth in GDP, even if you take 8% away from that, that's 8% GDP growth. That's amazing. And they had that kind of growth for many, many years. And then came the crash. They disproportionately put their money on real estate. And the real estate market has just collapsed in China. In that country, they've built entire cities bigger than St. Louis and said, okay, time for the people to move in. Well, nobody moved in because they didn't want to. Then they started forcing people to move in. And then these places started falling apart. Evergrande was the big company that just folded. They filed for bankruptcy. And Evergrande was a company that they were the big player. And if you wanted Evergrande to build a house for you with the weight, you said, okay, give us your money and we'll build you a house. Not a down payment, everything. So let's say a house cost $100,000 in China. The people would borrow $100,000, give that money for Evergrande, and then in 2 years, they'd move into their house. Well, they filed for bankruptcy, and they never got a house. Well, you say, well, that's okay. Evergrande can just give the money back. Well, first of all, they're bankrupt. Second of all, they didn't borrow the money from Evergrande. They borrowed the money from a bank. So the bank says, hey, we need our note. Your note is due. Make payments on this thing. They said, well, we don't have a house. They said, sorry, that's not my fault. So they're making house payments for a house they're not even living in. So now they have no place to live, plus they're making house payments. And the economy has taken a crash. There was a guy, I don't know if I did a story on this last week or maybe I just read about it and left it off the podcast. I forget. But this was a guy who had a job with a marketing firm, okay? And he was making X amount of dollars. Let's say I'm going to round. Let's say $1,000 a month is what he was making, just a round figure. His rent was $500 a month, but half your rent, okay, he was fine. He lost his job. He then had to get a job at a retailer for $300 a month. So his total pay was more than his rent. Now, what's he doing? Well, he's working a second job and he's going through savings. Well, savings are finite. He's going to be out of savings soon. And there's nothing to do because there's no jobs to take. And the economy over there is just, it's awful. It's terrible. It's to the point where if they don't do something different, the economy is going to crash. They have a huge problem with population because they had the one family, one child deal where the family only needs one child. You can't have two, you can't have three. Well, that went on for so long that now their population is very old. And they're telling the people, okay, it's time to have children. And the people say, no, we don't have any money to have children. Sorry. Big problem. Xi has even come in to say, look, here's what you have to do. You have to suck it up for the state. And they're saying, suck it up for the state? Suck this. So Xi can't make you can't throw 1.3 billion people. You can't throw them all in jail. You can't take them all and charge them with espionage and give them a death sentence. Okay, so the country is revolting. But from a business standpoint, China still has very strong businesses. But here's the dual-edged sword to that. I mean, for years, Western companies have complained about Chinese copycats, okay, especially here in the States. They had no regard for intellectual property. They just stole everything, stole it. Now the copycats are coming for the Chinese company. In fact, there's a company, I did a story on this years ago called Luckin Coffee, and it was the Chinese rival to Starbucks, okay, and even Luckin Coffee, I think they're here in the States on the East Coast, but they went onto the New York Stock Exchange because they said, well, here's our books. See, we qualify to be on the New York Stock Exchange. They said, wow, you sure do. Sure, we'd love to have you on the stock exchange. And they started looking into the books, and Luckin Coffee, it's a Chinese company. They just lied, okay? It's not that they fudged. It's not that they padded. They just made stuff up and just lied. And the New York Stock Exchange says, pound sand, you're not being on our market. You're a bunch of liars. Well, Luckin Coffee is very popular in China. In fact, it was second only to Starbucks for years, but now they're actually ahead of Starbucks. Apparently, it's a good product. And there's a lookalike company in Thailand called Luckin Coffee that says damages Luckin Coffee's brand. There's also a beverage franchise called Haiti in China. It's a big tea place. In fact, they just opened up the first store in New York, and it sells something called Chinese foam tea, which sounds disgusting to me, but people like it, I guess. And there's a company in Singapore called He Tea, not Haiti, but He Tea, a big ripoff from Haiti. Luckin Coffee Thailand is a big ripoff of Lucky Coffee China. In Nigeria, behind Nigeria's first lithium processing plant launched with great ceremony in October, it's not Hangfeng Lithium, who's the big lithium company that supplies batteries for Tesla, but it's called Hanfeng Lithium, same name, same everything. But it's a Nigerian company. And the Chinese are saying, hey, you've copied our name. They said, yep, sure have. Nothing you can do about it. And they're right. They're just stealing their intellectual property. Now, as more Chinese companies go overseas and become coveted brands, they're discovering one of the pitfalls of international success. That's imitators. Now, after all, you're more at risk if you're actually successful and famous. That's not my word. That's Catherine Lee. She's a senior partner at the international law firm of Dentons and Royek, one of the lawyers that represents China's Haiti. International lawyers interviewed by the Wall Street Journal said that inquiries from Chinese companies seeking to protect their intellectual property has risen in years. There were nearly 6.2 million trademark registrations in China in 2022 alone, triple that compared with 5 years earlier. That's according to the China National Intellectual Property Administration. It's funny that they actually have a government entity in there called that when they spent years just copying people's intellectual property. But now the worm has turned because China has strengthened reinforcement at home with higher penalties for patent infringements, shortened the time the courts take to handle the cases. In other words, you go right to the top of the front if you're trying to copy a Chinese company in China. In fact, China handled around 430,000 first instance civil IP cases. That's way up from 2018. Starbucks sued Jibake Coffee. They're a Chinese coffee shop chain using the Starbucks Chinese characters for trademark infringement, alleging that the latter had copied its doppelganger and it's just causing confusions. Well, actually, Starbucks won the Chinese case, and Jibake was ordered to pay damages and change its name. Now, Luckin Coffee, let's get back to them. This was in China. Let's go back to Thailand. Luckin Coffee, which recently knocked off Starbucks as the top spot in the Chinese coffee market, is fighting against a Luckin Coffee lookalike in Thailand. In fact, pictures emerged online 2 years ago showing a cafe in Thailand with the Luckin Coffee logo, which is a blue deer on a white background looking to the left. Now, the logo of Chinese-based Luckin Coffee shows a white deer on a blue background looking right. So they've copied the name, copied the logo. They've just switched the colors and it's looking in a different direction. Other than that, it's the same. Well, the Chinese company, the Chinese Luckin Coffee Company, issued a statement saying that the Thai store is fake and it's going to take legal action. Herein lies the rub. In December of last year, Thai Luckin Coffee said on social media that Thailand's Central Intellectual Property and International Trade Court rejected Luckin's case for trademark and copyright infringement. And here's why. Because in Thailand, just like in China, they copied China in this regard. In Thailand, they have what they call a first-to-file regiment for intellectual property, which grants rights to whoever registers the trademark in the country first. So what happened is Thailand Luckin Coffee registered the trademark in Thailand. They also registered names like TikTok, Tmall, and other Chinese popular companies. Okay, but they registered them all. In fact, they Chanel, Tesla, the name Trump. They registered all these in Thailand. Now, Luckin Coffee in Thailand was registered back in 2018, 3 years ahead of when China tried to sell coffee in Thailand. Now, actually, Luckin Coffee Thailand says, nope, we're the real Luckin Coffee in this country. And Xi can't throw people in jail for espionage because it's a different country. So it sucks to be you, China. You became popular and everybody's copying your stuff, just the good ones. In fact, some 73 of the 100 most valuable Chinese brands in 2023, as determined by the marketing firm Kantar, attempted to have their trademark registered in Thailand. 73 out of 100. Now, in nearly half the cases, it appears to have been done by third parties suspected of not being legitimate owners of the trademark. In other words, just go in and register it. Take a popular Chinese company that's not doing business in your country, copyright the trademark, and now it's yours, even though you haven't opened a store, but now it's yours, okay? That's the law in Thailand, and they did it in China for years. It didn't work in China so much because, sure, they'd register a trademark, and they could sell it in China, but they couldn't take a trademark that was registered in the West and sell it in the West. They can only sell it in China, okay? So the real market, the real money to be made, they couldn't take advantage. But a coffee store isn't something that's imported. It's kind of like it's home brewed, to pardon the pun. Now let's go back to Nigeria. That company that's billing itself as Hanfang Lithium Industry treated Chinese ministers of solid mineral development, Diki Alake, to a red carpet reception and gave him a gold spade and a ceremony. In the ceremony, making the construction company a 250 million lithium processing plant. Okay, and they let the guy in on and gave him money. So days later, Nigeria's Janfang released a statement taking issue with the media reports that called itself a subsidy of China's Hanfang Lithium. They're one of the largest producers of lithium-ion batteries. And they said, look, we're not part of them. We're our own, okay? And they said that we're even using Chinese characters in our letter. We flat out stolen from the Chinese, but we're no part of them. We're our own company. And the Chinese are losing their mind, okay? In fact, China's Ganfeng has said it was surprised to see someone undertake an entire project using its name. It added that it was currently in the process of registering its trademark in Nigeria and elsewhere in the world. Nigeria's Janfeng and the ministry didn't respond for requests to comment. In countries with strong IP laws, Chinese companies have fared far better. But Thailand's not one of them. Nigeria is not one of them. Singapore, maybe it's one of them. But in Singapore, a store called He Tea Coffee began operating more than 6 years ago, selling drinks with a salty layer of cheese foam on top of its fresh tea. Its logo showed a cartoon man in black and white from the side drinking a cup. Now, He Tea is a copy of Hey Tea, the Chinese brand. Okay, Hey Tea which is the Chinese beverage that was founded in 2012, was already famous in the Chinese-speaking world for introducing cheese tea to a broad audience. Singapore's intellectual property office said it sided with the Chinese firm, invalidating he tea's trademark in 2021. Now, the office pointed to striking similarities from the shape of the head, the nose, the mouth, the angle of the head, the tilt, everything. The way the boy holds the cup in his right hand with 4 fingers visible. Now, for the future, intellectual property law practitioners say Chinese companies will need to do what Western companies did a long time ago. Carry out due diligence, register trademark early, and monitor their overseas use. Now, that advice comes too late for China's Luckin Coffee in Thailand and too late for the lithium company in Nigeria. But for the future, they'll need to do their due diligence if they want to protect their intellectual property. So they went the cheap way out. China built their brands on cheap labor, stealing intellectual property, and just making something for a fraction of the cost. Well, people in China make a decent wage anymore. They don't make pennies on the dollar. They make dollars on the dollar. They make a decent wage. Still not what you and I make here in the West. But they don't make a pittance, okay? And it costs more to manufacture over there. And a lot of the stuff that they manufacture over there has actually become pretty good stuff. Case in point, I'm a big fan of Harbor Freight tools, okay? Most of the tools I buy now are from Harbor Freight. Now, are Harbor Freight tools as good as Snap-on or Mac or the old Craftsman? Okay, no, they're not. They're not. They're absolutely not. But they're about a third or a fourth or a fifth the price. Now, I'm a hobbyist, not a tradesman when it comes to those types of tools. I don't have $4,000 to spend on tools to rehab a car. I have $800 to spend on tools, but not $4,000, okay? And that's the route I went. None of them are broken. None of them have failed. They've all done the job. So, and most of the stuff is made in China, some Taiwan, some other Asian countries, but most of them are made in China. So the bottom line is they're making better stuff now when it comes to the lower tech stuff. It's better stuff. Maybe not as good as stuff in the West, but almost as good for a fifth the price. Okay, I can handle that. But now that they've built the better mousetrap, people are copying their better mousetraps. Shocking, I know. And it kind of just sucks to be you. And that's why I say China's rise to the top is already starting to, there's a hole in the balloon. There's a hole in the boat. It's sinking quickly. And I don't know that there's a way around this, because the way around this is to give more power to the entrepreneurs in China, because that's who built that country up to what it is today, or was a year or two ago. But the government won't let you do that anymore. When you become famous like Jack Ma and make a lot of money like Jack Ma, they throw you in prison until you get 3/4 of it back and apologize to the state. Who's going to start their own company? Nobody. If they want to start their own company, they'll just leave. Unless China gets its stuff together, they'll never be a big player in the world, a bigger player than they are now. I will say that. They'll never be a part of the big community of the West, which is really what they want to do, I think. But they can't do it under a communist dictator. They want to do the right thing. They want to be prosperous in China. Give the people power. Let them talk out against your dopey president. We sure do here in this country. And really, you can say whatever you want in this country for the most part. Yeah, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, but you know what I'm saying. Freedom has its benefits. And in most cases, the more freedom you have, the better off you're going to be. China's going in the wrong direction if they want to be prosperous. Well, that's it. I'm done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's my email address. Thank you again for all the emails. I got some more this week. I appreciate it. I do respond to all my emails. Send me an email. I do respond. Share the podcast with your friends. I appreciate it. That's it. I'm done. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.